46% of PlayStation gamers in the US indicated that if Call of Duty were available on Game Pass, they would consider subscribing to Game Pass. Now, the thing I want to clarify, though, is that they then included that YouGov survey at the end, and it doesn't quite say that. So on today's weekly Muse, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a follow-up to something we talked about last week. Alex, you remember when we were talking about everybody screaming about release dates for the PS6?
Yes.
And then once I actually got to look at the document that everybody was complaining about, or that was leaked from Sony, what it basically said is that the Call of Duty franchise would theoretically be offered on their systems until like 2027, and the new console release would essentially be after that because they wouldn't have access to it. That's basically what the upshot of it was. So what we basically learned is that sometime after 2027 is when Sony plans on releasing a PS6. Not exactly the hugest thing to understand, because that's still quite a ways off.
What you were telling me before is that that's not the most important part of that document. That's just the thing that people went, oh my god, PS6.
Yeah, here's the thing that's amazing. That is legitimately one paragraph on page 8 of a 22-page document. That's it.
That tracks.
Yeah, that's page 8. I don't think most people really discussed what the overall document was about, because I think that it's worth talking about. And Lord knows, one, I'm not good at reading, internal documentation, because frankly, it gets very boring to me, and I haven't exactly combed through it with a fine-tooth comb. But even just a cursory look at it, you realize what the actual point of this document was. And so, basically, Sony Interactive Entertainment had put this out back in October 28th of 2022. And they say that it's a leaked document. I'll get into why I have some reservations about that in a minute. But the reason why they put this out as what they refer to as a confidential document was about the potential ramifications of the company when it comes to the merger of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. That's what the whole document was actually about. And in that, what they're mostly talking about is the effect of the Call of Duty franchise. It's even in that paragraph that I was discussing before. It's basically on the idea of what Call of Duty would mean if it's not available on their platform. So that's the real key. And there were some interesting things that I happened to see that I thought I would just talk a little bit about, because I found them to be more interesting, I think, in terms of how companies view their franchises.
Okay.
And that Call of Duty seems to have so much market share at this point that it really is the thing that everyone is focusing on. Whether that makes sense or not, I don't.
I don't think I've ever really played a Call of Duty or any of those shooters.
It's not necessarily our kind of game, but it is a huge franchise. I'll have to admit that. One of the things that they discuss in this document is the idea that it's not replicable. And the reason why they talk about this is in terms of Call of Duty and Battlefield. And so one of the things that they cite is that in August of 2021, more than 400 million Call of Duty games had been sold, while Battlefield had sold just 88.7 million copies. What they go on to discuss is that if they lost the ability to have access to a Call of Duty franchise, it would just take so many years and billions of dollars in order to build a competing franchise that would possibly just not have the market share, and Battlefield's kind of the example that they give of that.
Yeah.
So right up at the front, I understand that, and as they talk about in this particular document, there's multiple teams at Activision working for 3 to 5 years each on Call of Duty games so that they can do annual releases. It's a huge deal. We know that.
Yeah, that makes sense since they pump them out so much.
Yeah, they do. And they can pretty much rely on the fact that they are going to make bank every time they put them out, even if they are, from my personal opinion, pretty cut and paste. Like, I've played enough Call of Duty games to be at the point where it's like I don't even remember what happened in each individual game, or even if it was a Call of Duty game that I played.
Well, I mean, the question is really now, are people playing those for the story, or are they playing those for the multiplayer modes?
I mean, the fact is that if you have anyone playing for long-term on those shooters, it's probably on multiplayer.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing for competitions and all the rest of it. I don't know how many people really follow for a single-player campaign. That I don't know. And if it is in the document, it didn't really pop out to me so far. The other thing that I thought was very interesting, though, was that they're citing a survey that came out in January of 22 from YouGov. Including Call of Duty on GamePass would have a profound impact on gamer preferences for multi-game subscription services. 46% of PlayStation gamers in the US indicated that if Call of Duty were available on Game Pass, they would consider subscribing to Game Pass. Now, the thing I want to clarify, though, is that they then included that YouGov survey at the end, and it doesn't quite say that.
No?
No, it's kind of fascinating. It doesn't say if Call of Duty was put on. It says 46% of PlayStation gamers in the US indicated the inclusion of Activision titles in Game Pass would make them consider subscribing to the Xbox service.
Okay, so they just correlate that with that.
They correlate that Call of Duty is the thing, but if you go down to the bottom, in my little sleuthing thing, it says that options presented to respondents were Call of Duty, but then also like Crash Bandicoot, Skylanders, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, Diablo, Overwatch, StarCraft, Warcraft. So I'm thinking some of them might have been interested in joining.
I feel like it comes down to being Call of Duty and then maybe like Overwatch and maybe Warcraft, and what was the other one?
StarCraft,
Diablo.
Diablo.
I don't think people are getting Game Pass to play StarCraft.
No. I can see, though, that if they were to include, like...
Or Crash Bandicoot, for that matter.
No, or Spyro? Oh, come on. Yeah, no, I think that a lot of those might not necessarily get people to buy Game Pass. I could see, though, if they put, like, Diablo 4, and they put that on Game Pass, that might be something that drives sales.
Maybe.
Who knows? We're also talking about trying to get people that don't already have an active Xbox Game Pass subscription, which they even talk about in here is quite a significant number, even compared to PlayStation's live services of the type. But so there's a few things like that I thought were kind of interesting, because it seems like they're kind of laser focused in on this idea of Call of Duty being the big issue here, and not having access to it would be detrimental to their business, which I get just because of the amount of active users that it has and the amount of money that it generates. But it really didn't have nearly as much to do with the release date of a PS6. I mentioned at the beginning that I had a little bit of reservation about the confidentiality of the document. The only reason I say that, Alex, is because it does say at the beginning that it's confidential, contains business secrets, and so everyone's like freaking out that it got leaked. However, when you get to the leaked documents, there's a ton of very important redactions that are done in it, with just giant black bars across a lot of would have been really useful information, even in the part that they cite, where Sony plans on launching its next generation, they have a little thing in parentheses which says, which is likely to occur around, and then that's blacked out. So we don't even have the date that they listed in the document to say when the new PlayStation was expected to be released. And then at the very bottom, where they get into these addendums, which would, have supporting material like the annexes, it's just a giant black box.
You can probably show it on screen too.
I'm gonna show it because I have a screen clip so that people can see it, but it says, like, confidential, contains business secrets, but the entire Annex 1 is just a giant ass black box of nothing. And it's like, so it might have been a confidential document, but at the same time, it has been highly redacted since it got released. So I don't know what version of this it was, but it was definitely past the original paths that would have gone out to the higher ups. There's some missing data in here. It feels like this was probably something that was given secondhand to somebody else, and then they threw it out there on the internet. There's some really important information there, especially if you were to say, hey, here's when the next PlayStation is coming out, to actually have the date that they said, even though it's not actually listed there. The context seems to have gotten a little lost because people laser focused in on this one very specific thing.
Yeah, that's what people tend to do. They're more excited about when the console might come out than the other businessy side of things, probably.
From the customer's market, obviously, we would be interested in when the consoles are going to come out. We might not necessarily care all that much about the ins and outs of the business models, but in some ways I think we kind of should care, because the businesses are the whole reason why the consoles exist. And so what they decide to do on their end has a direct effect on the product that you get. When I see something where it seems like this giant document to explain that it would be really good to have Call of Duty, what it says to me is what the company is prioritizing as what they want to put out on their system. And I don't play Call of Duty, by and large, which makes me a little more wary of what the focal point for the future is going to be. If they're talking about just trying to emulate multiplayer shooters, I would be a little bit concerned.
We just want battle royales and nothing else.
We just want battle royales. I saw a thing just this morning, and it was an extra punctuation, and Yahtzee had made a really interesting point because he was talking about the live services dying off. And one thing that he said that really stuck with me, the way that bureaucracies essentially work in corporations is, hey, I saw this model and made a lot of money, let's just make one of those and then we'll make the same money. And it doesn't work that way. No. That Battlefield is actually probably, they use the example here, and they kind of acknowledge that, you can't just replicate it immediately without a lot of time in. But no, you can't just make your own version of Call of Duty and call it like Mall of Scooty or something, and then Mall of Scooty. It's where you use a scooter, you go around a mall, and it's a first-person shooter, but you're riding around on scooters in a mall.
Yeah, and it's part Tony Hawk.
And it's part Tony Hawk, yeah.
To get both the Activision titles people want from that.
You're on scooters, it's Tony Hawk, you get to do tricks and stuff, but you have a gun in your hands, and you get to shoot each other in a battle royale. Damn, so that actually sounds fun.
Really what it is drive-by scooting.
Drive-by scooting, yeah, exactly. That's what we can call it. Anyway, well, great, we just made a killer franchise right there. No one's doing that. But the general notion that he was talking about is the way that a lot of companies have a tendency of thinking is that, hey, this thing made money as a live service or as an MMO or something like that. He even talked about World of Warcraft in this regard. Everybody needed to make a World of Warcraft afterward, and then they all died off because no, people aren't going to leave World of Warcraft to come play your thing. They already have the MMO.
Yes and no. People leave World of Warcraft all the time.
But they keep coming back.
a lot of people keep playing it and coming back.
If they're going to play an MMO, like either they get sick of the MMO and they probably stop playing the one they played, or they come back to the one that they already have all their stuff on.
Yeah, I'm gonna say right now I have tried quite a few MMOs in my day, and the only one that really sticks is World of Warcraft to me.
Yeah, I know. You've gone back to it several times, probably because you're familiar with it. And
I never really stop, I just take breaks.
Yeah, fair enough. Usually, like, when I'll see a kind of game and I like a kind of game, I'll probably stick with the franchise that it's in, and I might take a pass at games that are in that genre, but I don't necessarily stick with them like I did with the originals. Who knows? Sony, if you're out there and you're listening to this, if you come up with a killer new idea, you might end up with an exclusive property that Microsoft doesn't have. Maybe focus in on that. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to just bring up. A little bit more context and talk about what I think is a larger issue in that document that got lost in the process.
Yeah.
While everyone was screaming about, we have a date for the PS6. No, you don't. You have a time period after which you think that the PS6 is coming out.
Anywhere between tomorrow and 2050.
We are sometime between right this second and the heat death of the universe. We'll see a PS6. So there you go. Hot off the presses, everybody. You can take that to the bank and cash it.